bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Agree?
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
This is the greatest show of all time.
And this is episode 166 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I am your co-host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, your friend and mine, the Ryan George. And on this week's show, we are going to be reviewing episode 2 and 3 of HBO's runaway hit, The Last of Us. Can it keep up the momentum from the first episode? Well, let's talk about it. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my tag team partner, IG, who's under the weather this week. Get well soon, buddy, and we'll catch you on the next one. So, Ryan, what do you got for us?
All right, yeah. So we missed last week, so we've got kind of 2 episodes in one for today, and so we're gonna cover both. I thought at first I was gonna just split it up. I'm kind of splitting them up, but we're just gonna kind of talk about different things. And I think this show is really rich thematically, and in what they're doing with the characters, and I just think there's a lot of really interesting stuff. So I kind of like that we're talking about a couple episodes at the same time, because interestingly, like, not a lot happened. Right? Like, but a lot happened. So it's like, not a lot of story unfolded, but a lot of story unfolded.
We're like boys, but we're not boys.
Yeah,
I know you, but I don't know you. A lot happened, but a lot didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So anyway, so the episode 2 opens with a really interesting scene. They're in Jakarta. And we have a scientist who's brought in basically to examine a body, and it we're getting a good amount of body horror in this show, which is sufficiently creepy. But we get a little bit of that body horror with her. She freaks out, and it's basically like, yeah, we need to bomb the city, me included. So my first question I was going to ask you is, so you're president of the U.S. Outbreak has started in New York, and you got to nuke New York City to possibly stave off an infection. Do you do it?
I mean, it's rough making that call. There's 12 million people in the metropolitan, me included, and you. So I think you almost have to. If they're telling you that there's no cure, no chance for a vaccine, and no shot at containment, I think you absolutely have to bomb cities.
So that's like the moral. Yeah. So then you end up, if you're on the outskirts, if you're on the suburb, well, maybe not even suburbs, but kind of like in the sticks, you're okay. But otherwise, yeah, it's like the cities are. As we see later on, I guess the cities, they really did try that. They really did try to bomb the cities and try to get rid of that infection. So I guess one thing that's interesting, I think anytime we have like a zombie movie or some kind of apocalyptic movie, and I'll come back to this comparison later with a few of my other questions, but like a decision has to be made by the writers on how much information you're going to give. Are you going to give every little detail about what started this outbreak, how it works, how people die, how people are infected, or do we not give you anything and it's just all tension? What do you think about how the show's managed that so far, as far as the amount of information that it's given us versus what we want to know about everything?
Well, we found out more in the last 3 episodes than we did in over 100 episodes of The Walking Dead. Like, they never clued you into what exactly happened other than kind of Eugene's bullshitting us for a certain amount of time. But they never told us what went on or how we got where. So, yeah, I like it because they've slowly given us the information that we needed. And it was cool. One thing that we missed last week was that there was several points where Joel or his daughter could have ate flour, and they avoided it with the cookies and the pancakes. And so I thought that was a neat little hint.
Yeah, I think the show has done so it's done a really good job of like, that kind of show don't tell when it comes to storytelling, right? Like it's not a lot of times when there's a lot of exposition, it feels like exposition. It's like, oh yeah, this is the point where they're going to spend 5 minutes telling us all the stuff, everything that we need to know. And what the show's done, and it's not hand holding us because, it's like basically they're giving us information in a way that feels real, and it's trickling in, but we start to know more. And yeah, it's like that information with the flower, it's not, it's not insulting the listeners or the viewers' intelligence. Like you're either going to put that together or you're not. You're either going to put together that, oh yeah, she wanted to make pancakes and she didn't. And then, the theory about the flour, oh, this all starts to make sense. Like you either get it or you don't. And I like that the show is not forcing us, and that every time we get a bit of information, like even like how the monsters or zombies work, like they didn't tell us, they kind of told, it was a throwaway joke in the second episode until it turned out, nope, they can't, like they can't hear, or they can't see, they have amazing sound, hearing. And so we're witnessing things as they unfold rather than them telling us in every little detail about it, which I really like about how this show's going so far.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, in the game is a lot like that too. I've started playing it, but I'm kind of staying behind the episodes. There is no hand-holding in this game. Like you've got to find your own path. There's no question marks or anything leading your characters. You're searching around, or you're just not going to find what your next objective is. So the show and the game kind of parallel in that way.
Yeah. So what do you think about its depiction of a post-apocalyptic world? Again, I'm coming back to that, but we've seen this so many times. I think that's was my issue coming into it, is we've seen this so many times. How do you make this different? What do you think about so far about its depiction of in this case, post-apocalyptic Boston for the most part? How do you think it stacks up to other shows that we've seen, or other shows or movies that we've seen?
Well, I was there just, I'd say about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And some of those buildings that are laying on the ground, I'm, pretty familiar with. I was there taking pictures and stuff. So, I think they did well. And one of the things that they did real well too was that it's a maze. It really is. It's a 3-dimensional maze to get around. It's not just, weave in and out of the buildings or step over some debris. Like you're climbing and jumping, and somebody's going to have to climb around and open up doors for you. So they've done that really well, I think, too. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And in those situations you mentioned, it kind of feels like a video game, right? Like where there's a clear path, and nope, you can't go through that path for whatever reason. And then, you have to climb over things or jump over things or whatever it is. But I like the way it looks. Like I really love, the way they had the kind of buildings, one on top of the other. Clearly this show has a big budget, and I think they're doing a really good job of depicting it. Obviously it starts to look similar to other things we've seen. But when it does have those big scenes where you're getting a full shot of the entire city, I think it does a really good job. And then Boston is such a unique kind of old city that I think they did a really good job of depicting some of that architecture and how it would look in this kind of post-apocalyptic hellscape. So I think they're doing a really good job with making it look good and not feel it's familiar enough, but it doesn't feel like, we're retreading other territory.
Well, spoiler alert as well, and I don't think it's a huge spoiler, but this isn't the last major city we're going to see.
Yeah.
So we get to see several, and I'm interested to see their take on each one and how things went down differently.
Now, as someone who started playing the games, what do you think of the zombies? So obviously in that second episode, we get that really great build to when we get our first, experience with, a mature, I guess, for lack of a better word, zombie. How do you think they handled that, the design, and, was it sufficiently scary? How did that work for you?
Well, we talked about the week before too, that I like that they're clumsy, but I don't like that they're fast. Visually, I think they're very interesting, and I like that there's a reason why they look the way they look. They didn't just, some video games drive me crazy where it's supposed to be the end of the world, and then we get a giant zombie. There's no reason for it. It's just a harder boss. Yeah, I absolutely hate that. But for this, I know that they're going to get bigger and scarier as we go along. But at least we have some idea why.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I like it. I think they've done a good job. I really love the sound design. So obviously you have these monsters that can't see. So their hearing is really important, and that they seem to be using echolocation is a great twist on that kind of zombie genre, and makes them even more terrifying. It's interesting. I think I don't know if I like fast zombies or not, but my issue is I think fast zombies add a ton of tension. Like I was just watching a great zombie show, if you haven't seen it, Black Summer. And in that show, the zombies are fast. And what it adds is just it adds tension. You know, if you have slow zombies, you can always get away from the slow zombies. Obviously, then, you know, it's like dealing with hordes or when they're unexpected. But I feel like there's not the same kind of tension and threat that you get with the fast zombies. I think the issue with the fast zombies is it's most of the time the stories are just completely unrealistic. Like you're not outrunning several zombies running at you full speed. That's just insane. I think this show does, you know, I think it helps in this case that they're blind. So then we're playing a little bit with sound. So it's not just running away from them, but it's dealing with the sound. And then, you know, obviously with the new, well, I guess that's another thing that they introduced in episode 2 is, what do you think of the so they changed it so you can't catch it by airborne particles, but they do have this kind of hive mentality. So what do you think about that?
Well, that was the one thing that I didn't like. Yeah. Like, you were outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1 by these things, and now they have some sort of worldwide web that they can communicate with each other. I don't think it's necessary. Yeah. Romero never designed the zombies to be fast because you were outnumbered. And let's face it, I mean, most of the world not being in your cardio condition, we wouldn't make it very long if there was fast zombies. I mean, it's bad enough they got the place surrounded. Now we can't even run away from them. It doesn't bode well for the survivors. You know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it builds tension, but it definitely it stacks the deck in the favor of the zombies. And I feel like it's often just unrealistic that they're able to get away from them. And again, if you've got 2, you're done. Like you can't go, you can't run from 2 of them. But so far, like they've managed it well. Like, and, you know, they're not outrunning them. They're being pretty stealthy so far. So they've been able to avoid them. So I think that works with what they're doing so far. But yeah, I'm kind of like I'm up in the air right now as far as like that revelation that there's like a hive mentality. It's cool. But is it necessary? You know, and I know that part of it was that we didn't want to have, you know, Pedro Pascal wearing a mask again for an entire show. So that's part of why I think they made that change. But yeah, it remains to be seen if it was really like a necessary thing, or, you know, how then they have to come up with these creative ways to kind of write themselves out of bad situations.
So my friend Lynn thinks that the bombing could have just spread the infection more.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's the problem with the pandemic or any outbreak early on, right? Is like you don't know what it is, how it spreads, what it's capable of. So it's kind of hard to make any rash decision. So you just start making whatever decision is first that comes to mind, and whoever has the power, I guess, to make that decision, right? Like we saw, you know, we witnessed it on a very, very small scale, relatively speaking, you know, with COVID. But like, you know, when you're in that phase where nobody knows what's going on, you get all kinds of different ideas of what to do, what actions to take, and like, who knows what the right thing is.
Well, I stand by the statement, Thanos wasn't wrong.
Probably not. Although, like, there's the thing of he could have just doubled, you know, resources. Like, what was to stop him from doing that? So
there'd be no movie ride.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, obviously the relationship between Joel and Ellie is the backbone of the story. That's going to be what that makes or breaks the show at the end of the day. I think if it works between them, it's going to be great. If it doesn't work between them, no matter how good the writing is, this episode 3 aside, like it's going to be hard to make that work. So first, what are your thoughts of Pedro Pascal's portrayal of Joel, and your thoughts of Bella Ramsey as Ellie? And then we'll get into their kind of dynamic together. But so far, like in the first 3 episodes, like you can take all 3 episodes, like what are your thoughts so far on how their performances are and the characters?
Despite them banging the drum on Bella Ramsey, because she looks slightly different than the character, I mean, attitude-wise, delivery-wise, I think she's spot on. And Pedro Pascal is just the man to me now. Like everything he shows up in, I saw a cute little interview between the two where she had asked them, what would you carry over from Game of Thrones? And he said, my robes. And he's like, and she's like, I knew you'd say that because they were really badass, and they were, but it wouldn't work with Joel and Princess Dorne. But yeah, he just embodies the stern, disappointed, worried dad so well. I mean, we saw a little bit of it in The Mandalorian, and we see it big time in this. Like he's gonna protect that kid with every ounce of his soul.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so far I gotta agree with everything. I think Pedro Pascal's been great. I like how he's kind of there's a couple of those moments where you can see him kind of internalizing a lot of his grief and which then I think turns into rage. Like I don't think he has an outlet to deal with what's gone on in his life, and it's very clear as a performance that he is holding on to that stuff, even in the scene after, again, his partner's dead, and I don't think he knows how to handle that, and that I think he feels like he's a failure, and I think that's part of what motivates him to kind of carry on with this mission, once it seems like it's over. But I love Bella Ramsey's portrayal of Ellie. Like, yeah, maybe she doesn't look like her, but she's spot on. I mean, she's great. I love the little, and I don't know if it's in the game, but that her kind of like almost like ADD or ADHD, like where she has to touch everything, and she almost can't stop. Like I love that about her character. It's like it's something that I don't know if she brought it to that character or if that's the way she was written, but it really works, and she's I think she's doing a great job. So now, what do you think about their dynamic so far? Like, is that working for you? Does it feel real, or does it feel like they have a solid rapport so far?
Oh, without a doubt. And it's that wandering off, even in this week's episode where she jumped down to just kind of explore and look to see what she could find. I was super worried about her. I mean, in that situation. Oh, look at here.
Hello.
There he is.
I'm sorry I'm late. Hospitals are notoriously slow.
We're just glad you're okay. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think she's playing the I've never seen the world teen well. It works. Yeah. Everything in the dynamic between them works because his constant sighs of please to shut up, please just do what I tell you to. I mean, I loved when he ran down those rules like don't bring up tests, don't tell people that you're immune, and please do what I say when I say, because I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the dynamic works well.
Yeah. What do you think, Ig? What are your thoughts so far on the dynamic between Joel and Ellie?
I really like it. Like, I think that, I didn't know that their pairing was going to work so well. I mean, they were both really good in Game of Thrones, but they weren't together, right? At any point, right? Because, obviously when she was on, she was one of the Stark loyalists. She was up at the north, and he died fighting the mountain. So they never saw each other, but they were both great in that. But I wasn't sure how well it was going to work together for both of them. But like, they played their role so well, and it just gives a balance, right? Because she's very naive, right? She's had a very limited look at anything in the world. She was in a Fedra school. She was doing her own thing, and they are very strict on what they teach people anymore. Basically, it's just, basic how to survive and how to notice that somebody has this infection. They don't teach history anymore or anything else. Like, I suppose there's some books you can learn some stuff from, but he's been around. Like he's a service member. He's done a lot of things. He's obviously survived this long into the infection. So, you've got kind of the Yoda and Luke kind of thing, because Luke is young and doesn't know what is going on, and Yoda's seen it all. So it's kind of that kind of dynamic, and they're playing it really, really well. And like she wants to do things, and she wants to be involved, and she wants to be able to help. I mean, her total obsession with trying to get a gun all the time says that, that the gun is part of what keeps you safe. So I want one too. I mean, because what if something happens to you? Now what do I do? And he's like, he knows that young people with no training, giving them a gun is generally a problem, because he's been around. I just love how they're putting everything together, and it's so deep that I think some of the things that I think about are going to be different from the things that you guys think about. And it's nice to have that stretch of imagination that you can go over.
Yeah. But as uninformed as Ellie is, she's definitely equipped to survive in this world. Yeah. Like, there's a certain amount of fear, a certain amount of intelligence in her, but you can see that she's ready for this. Yeah. And he'll protect her, with everything he's got. But I think that in the end, we'll see that she does some protecting too.
That was a great line where she's like, she wants a gun, and she's like, okay, I'll throw like, what am I going to throw, a sandwich at him or something like that? Which is one of the best lines in the show. But I do think, I know in the game she has military training. I believe they allude to that in the show as well. So it does make me interested. And maybe it's just that he's got to learn to trust her. And maybe that's part of it. Again, part of like, the storytelling is like, once he earns her trust, he will give her a gun. And that will be a big moment rather than him just giving her right off the bat. Or on the flip side, she snuck the gun in her backpack. When she uses the gun, he will get mad at her for using the gun or something like that. But, whatever the case, I do think, yeah, their dynamic has been great so far. And I think they both play off each other really well. I think they're good. They're a really good match. And I think we're starting to see like the facade break in him a little bit. And I think that we'll get into that a little bit more as we get into episode 3. So, which, speaking of episode 3, and Lynn, I watched my stepson play the game to answer that question. So I have some knowledge of the game, but also it was a long time ago and I have a terrible memory. So going on loosely, some stuff I remember. So if you know me, I'm a sucker for bottle episodes, and episode 3 is basically a bottle episode, right? We get bookended some with Ellie and Joel, but the majority of the episode is just a love story that could just be its own thing in its own world. You could have written that as its own movie, and that was it. So I guess the first question for you guys is, regardless of what your thoughts on the episode were, is 3 episodes in too early for a bottle episode?
I think that, I do think it was probably a little early because we don't even really have a full grasp on what Joel and Ellie are yet. I mean, they started out as 3 and we lost Tess. So I think we should have spent a little bit more time with the main characters. As wonderfully as that episode carried out, I think maybe 4 or 5 would have been a better placement for it. I thought it was a little soon.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of disagree. And only the point is, where they're located and how quickly he needs to get that truck to get to Wyoming, because they're outside of Boston. Wyoming is a long ways away. So they're going to get the truck, right? And if he just got up and like, we got a truck and then we bottled this episode later in the series or something, it doesn't give the truck as much meaning. It doesn't give the resources they were able to get that early into their trip as much sentiment. Like, I feel like after watching episode 3 very strongly that like it's pretty much a godsend that they were able to get everything they got, because I mean they got food and guns and gas and a truck that works and medicine and all kinds of supplies to head off on this trip that's going to be difficult. It's not like today's roads where like you drive 20 miles and there's another McDonald's, right? You're gonna have to find a way to survive a couple thousand miles across the country in a truck that you hope is going to run good. Now the truck does look like it's sound because everything that he did there was like everything worked really well. But bottling in this and seeing everything he went through and everything he did to protect all this stuff that he had there makes the sacrifice to know that as he's dying, he's leaving all that stuff there to somebody, and he knows who he's leaving it to, so that they can continue to thrive. I think it gave it a strong annotation of what's going on.
So as I mentioned, the main story is it's a love story following Nick Offerman's Bill and Maury Bartlett's Frank, who, if you haven't seen what's that show called? Oh crap, I'm forgetting the name, but he's great in it. I'll remember it later.
Parks and Rec? No,
not Parks and Rec. He was in, well, he might have been, I didn't watch Parks and Rec. He was in White Lotus, season 1. He's great in that. It took me a minute to recognize him, but Maury Bartlett's great in that, and great in this as well. But so basically the story begins at the outset of the outbreak, and basically covers the next 20 years. And from what I understand, it is a major departure from the game. We do not get that aspect of it, and his death does not happen.
No, they were kind of buddies. It wasn't a classic love story like this was.
Yeah. So Cinik, do you love a classic love story sprinkled into your zombie show?
Well, I really did, because it made me care about them. If they were just 2 buddies and one of them died, even though, I didn't want to gay ship anybody, but I got the feeling from the word jump as soon as he found him in the hole that they were going to be in a relationship, just the way they vibed in the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, I did. It's hard for straight guys to watch gay guys. We're not used to it. We don't see it all the time, so I saw a lot of backlash about that online.
Really?
But because it's just different than the norm. It's different than what they're used to, especially when they started kind of fooling around. It's just two beards smushed together. It's not but I really thought it touched me.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what could the backlash be, because it's not even like they made it. It's not like, sometimes if they change the gender or change the race of somebody in an established property, that people get up in arms. But he was gay, so it's like, what could you be upset with? That the fact that they actually showed his relationship, then that's kind of ridiculous. But I'm not shocked.
I think it's a question of what people are used to.
Yeah.
You see a kiss in a sitcom and people would get weirded out, but you see intimacy between two men, and I think that bothers certain people. Yeah. And at first I was like, well, this, I hope this doesn't go too far, but it ended up being, it was really beautiful. It was really, it was sweet, because when you get in a situation like that, it's not hard to draw a parallel between you and the person you love. Whether it be man, woman, whatever, and you start thinking about, through the relationship, like, what would happen if you found your wife and then she got older and then she got, so it really, it made me think a lot during the course of the episode, and it, towards the end, it really broke me up.
Yeah. So what I also found interesting in this episode, even in addition to just it being a fantastic story, was that in this type of situation, like zombie apocalypse, you got a choice. You can either try to join a community or you can try to isolate yourself. And most stories we get are people in these communities, and generally people that isolate themselves do not do very well. But I like that we kind of got this angle perspective. So I guess for both of you, we'll start with you, Ig. If zombie apocalypse, do you isolate yourself or do you try to find a community?
Well, if I can isolate myself the way Nick did here, because, the biggest problem people make with isolation is they tend to get too small, right? They isolate their home or just a real small place. And that is way too easy to, like, if you lose any ground when you isolate that small, you run into, like, now you have nowhere left to go. But he isolated his entire neighborhood. Like it was huge. So you got room to grow crops. You've got room that if something gets broken, you can build it back in. You've got somewhere to go. And that's the biggest problem when people try to isolate, is they isolate small. And he did it right. He isolated big, and he had the knowledge, and he was able to get the resources to actually fortify and keep it safe. But myself, I know that I can't do everything by myself most of the time. I can do quite a bit. I've done enough survival training and stuff that for a while I could survive, but to survive and thrive, I'm going to need other people around, right? Well, because I might get sick. I might break my leg and I don't know how to reset it. Something might come up. So I'm going to look for a community, but I'm probably going to observe said community for a while before I even make myself known. Like, I'm going to hide somewhere and see what kind of community they're doing. So am I going to end up at Hilltop, or am I going to end up at the prison? Like, where am I going?
Yeah. What are
you
saying?
The first thing you want to do is definitely relocate, my friend.
Because, I'm getting out of the cold.
Yeah. The winters are just brutal there.
What are your thoughts, Cinik? Yeah. Isolation or community?
I mean, if you're as equipped as Bill was, isolation's the only way to go. But he did that because he hated humanity. He did that because he wanted everybody gone. He couldn't have been happier. Did you see the smile on his face when those trucks were pulling out? Now, I'm sure he would have felt differently if he knew they were going to drive him down the road and just kill them all. But he was happy, and he had a plan. Like, he had been ready for this his whole life. So this was his moment to shine, and he did. So if I was in that position, I would probably seclude myself as well.
All right. So one of the funnier moments in this episode was Ellie going back a little bit, Ellie finding a box of tampons, and got kind of the excitement. So I'll ask both you guys as well. Cinik, what would be your box of tampons moment? What's the item that you would find in a zombie apocalypse?
Know better. You both know what I'm going to say.
Reese's Cups.
A big bag of Reese's Cups. We'll just call it a day after that.
Hey, what about you?
And that's the trick, is like, how long has whatever been there, right? Because I mean, what if I say, like a nice 12-pack of Coke, but it's been sitting there for 20 years. I'm not drinking that. Like, it's turned into battery acid at that point, So you have to turn into non-perishable things, right? Things that just persist. I don't know. Maybe, like, I know food has been weird there, so maybe a box of MREs somewhere or something might have been good because it's shelf stable. It holds for a long time or something. And that's just me being too realistic, I guess. Because liquor's got to be easy to find because that stays forever, right? It never goes bad. Reese cups are going to turn moldy, and then you're going to be sad. Like, you find the bag of Reese cups, you open the first one, and it's a big green blob. Cinic's going to cry himself to death. And, so, like, I'm trying to think logically, but if we throw the logic out the window, I'm probably right next to him with the Reese cups or eggs, specifically the Reese's eggs that you get around, the flat ones, not the round ones, the flat ones that you get around Easter time.
Well, we can't skip the fact that this was an ongoing joke in Zombieland, and Tallahassee was just looking for Twinkies the whole movie. Mm-hmm. So, that is something that's not supposed to spoil, even though they do get stale after a while. But yeah. How about you, Ryan? What would you be looking for?
Honestly, it's funny. I asked the question. I have no idea what it
protein powder.
Probably be at that point. Probably, well, not too far off. Probably beef jerky, right? Probably, it'll last long. It's meat and protein, and you're probably not going to get a lot of that in the Fedra quarantine zone. So that might be, exciting. I figure it would last. I don't know. 20 years, who knows, but yeah, but it is funny. It did make me realize, like as a guy, like totally didn't consider the fact that that tampons would be hard to come by and probably something that women would need. And who knows if that whatever put together government is actually, producing that stuff. But, all right. So, episode ends, with, again, another really touching moment, between Frank and, why am I forgetting his name now? Bill. And, they each take their lives, I'm assuming. And then he leaves a note. And the note is to Joel. Clearly Ellie reads it. What do you think about, Cinik? What do you think about that moment, and how that worked? And, with Tess coming up and the kind of change that it does seem to spark in Joel, did that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, Joel has to rewire the fact that, he was living for Tess and now he'll have to live for Ellie. And that's hard, making that switch, giving up something and grabbing hold of something else to go on for. But I really liked the way Ellie dealt with that in the forest when she told him, like, Tess's death wasn't my fault. You guys aren't out here because of me. You're out here because you chose to be out here, and don't take it out on me. That was a big moment between the two of them because Joel didn't argue back. He just kind of shook his head. Yeah. He was like, checkmate, you got me. Yeah. And I really like that about the growing dynamic between the two of them. So, yeah, I mean, it was, everything about this episode was beautiful. I mean, everything from meeting to them falling in love to them going at the same time, because I identified with it. If I was in that situation and I found out that my wife was terminally ill, I don't think I'd want to be here anymore. So you were my purpose. You were my reason for being here. Line.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're going to go. So for episodes 2 and 3, give me your rating for each episode, thoughts on each one individually.
Well, I think episode 2 is just kind of a way to kind of like set up some other things, right? We're going to get moving. We're leaving the quarantine. We're showing some of the cordyceps infections things going on, how well they're able to communicate, the clickers, right? That they kind of are like bats with echolocation and things like that, it's all very interesting, and it's very necessary to get the story to keep moving, right? We need to know this information so that, like, if you step on something wrong or you're making a bunch of noise, that why can they find you? I think it's important, but it didn't progress the story much. It just gave us a lot of information we needed. It was really well done, really well shot, really well acted, and it was an emotional way to lose Tess. That's the worst kiss anybody's had, and it was gut-wrenching and heartfelt and everything that way. That, like, seeing somebody get lost that way, that I mean, again, now we've had 2 episodes in a row where somebody that we think is going to be an important part of the story, especially if you haven't played the game like me, dies, right? Because first you lost Joel's daughter, and now we lose Tess. And I think when you're willing to lose characters, as they've shown in Game of Thrones, when you're willing to lose important characters, that makes your show that much stronger, because you don't know who's safe, right? You don't know who gets to live and who's like, you don't go into it knowing like these people are definitely going to die. These people are going to live. We know what's going to happen. It's no big deal. There's struggle that goes on through this. So although they didn't go very far, they didn't get much done in that episode, they set up enough things for the rest of the series that I think it's a really important part of what's going to happen. And so episode 2, I would probably give an 8. Episode 3, a bottle episode that, like, while I understand why some people are saying, hey, it's too early to do this bottle episode, I think it was beautiful. The one downside I see to that episode at all is that we get no more Nick Offerman in this series. That's it. He's one and done. And I love Nick Offerman, man. He's great in just about everything I've seen him in. And he acted his ass off in this episode. You know, we get a little bit of Joel and we get a little bit of Ellie, but it really, this is Bill's episode, Bill and Frank, but mostly Bill. And seeing somebody who hates the world and is happy that everybody's gone and everything and is thriving and everything, let somebody in and then fall in love and go through a life and die together with the person that he fell in love with was an absolute beautiful thing to watch. And Cinik's right. It's hard as a straight man to watch some of those things because they're things that I'm not used to. But I drove past all of that and I watched it and I was moved, and it just made me think of how much I love my own family and how much all these things mean to me, that I'm hoping to be with my family till the end and with my wife till like last breath kind of thing. And it really touched me in a way that I didn't think this series was going to be able to get to me, but it did. So far, episode 3 has got to be, for me, the best episode of the series so far, even though it's a bottle episode, even though it didn't drive anything other than giving them some supplies in a truck to head to Wyoming. It's so far the best episode. I'm going to give it a 9.5.
Go ahead, Ryan.
All right, so let's see. Episode 2, I really liked it. It moved the story a little bit, but I think again it's one of those things where it was really important to establish relationships, which it did. You started to see the rapport building between Joel and Ellie. Obviously it had a huge dramatic moment with Tess dying. Again, something that has, resonates further along the show. But I think what the episode did really well was it really played with tension in a way that was almost masterful. Like I really liked the way the clickers were introduced and how they were used, and the design was really good. And so I think that episode 2 did a really good job of kind of setting the stage for what we can expect. Like this is just a couple of them. What's it going to be like? We got to see the Horde. We got continued trickling of the exposition in a way that felt real, like we talked about earlier. So I really liked episode 2. It didn't move as much, and I think the one moment I didn't quite love was the moment where they find that the fireflies were dead. I felt that was a bit underwhelming. Like, I don't know why, but it just didn't hit the way I feel like it should have. There should have been this major moment of disappointment and shock, and it didn't quite hit for me the way I expected it to. Yeah. So I think that was not great, but otherwise I thought it was a really good episode. I would have given that an 8.5. For episode 3, this episode, I do understand it being a little early for a bottle episode, although if you're going to do a bottle episode about this character, there's no other place to put it because this is when they get on the road. So I think it made sense to put it here, even though it's a little early. But other than that, I can't find a critique. I think this episode legitimately is up there with A God Walks Into a Bar, which is from Watchmen, the Ozymandias episode of Breaking Bad, The Sound of Her Wings episode of Sandman. Those are 3 of my, in the last 10 years, favorite episodes of TV, and this is right up there. I think it's a beautiful story. It's a love story, and I think it's really central to the story that this show is trying to tell. Like, it's a story about love and loss and the unexpected ways that you find them, and find both. And I think, this episode had all of that. And I think it told a story in that, whatever, 50 minutes that we got the meat of the story, that was emotionally resonant. Like, I didn't expect to have the feels or feel anything, this early in the show with two characters. I had no idea who they were, up until now. Like, I had no, if you would have told me that, an hour before the episode, I would have told you no way. But I think it was amazing. I mean, it had some amazing lines. It felt real. Like, it felt like a real relationship. And like you alluded to, Ig, it's like you start thinking about your own relationships and the people that you're with and what you would do in that situation. And I think that was one of the, it was just a powerful story. And I think it also, that letter, that moment is huge. I think that's where the switch flips in Joel, where he goes into like caretaker mode. And if we don't get that story leading up to that letter, I don't think it works as well. And so even though it's a little early to throw a bottle episode in, I think it makes perfect sense. And we still got a little bit of Joel and Ellie. We still got a little bit of their relationship, but I think that, it all really worked. And I'm amazed. Like, I think that, there were early rumblings that the show is going to be good. The early reviews are good. And so far it is knocking out the park. So, I mean, I rarely give out this high of a grade, but I've got to give it a 10. I can't think of anything wrong with this episode, except for Pedro Pascal's accent that's all over the place. Kind of reminds me of my West Indian grandmother, whose like accent changed with her emotions. Other than that, perfect episode of TV. I got to give it a 10.
Episode 2, which was called Infected, started out with Ellie laying on the grass with the light shining down on her, showing basically to us all that she's humanity's only hope. And I think she might be Joel's only hope too, because later down in the episode, after we video game or jump our way through the hotel and finally see some clickers and see what we're up against, we lose Tess. And anybody that knows the actress, by the way, her name is Anna Trove, I believe. And she was a big part of the show Fringe, but she was a huge part of the show Mindhunters on Netflix. And if you haven't seen that show, you need to go ahead and take a look at it, because it's spectacular. It stands right up with this. She was a huge loss. I mean, she was a complete rock star. She was the Eddard Stark of this show. We didn't expect her to die this soon, and she did. And, all of us, including Joel, were left holding the bag. So this show, a large part about this show is dealing with Joel's trauma and him learning to be human again after everything that's happened. I'm going to have to give Infected an 8. It was solid. Visually, it was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It moved all over the place. And we got to see the outside world and the fledgling feelings between Joel and Ellie as, kind of a father and daughter. Now, episode 3. I mean, how do you show just a relationship, a love over from beginning to end in 60 minutes? And they did it, and it didn't feel rushed. And it really touched me in a lot of ways. It was perfect, from Ellie's trip to the basement to her kind of testing to see what these infected were, to Joe describing the basically 2 or 3 days that the world ended. It really, really showed how much of a kid she is, but also kind of fearless as well. I mean, it was beautiful. The story between Bill and Frank were you couldn't have done it any better. All the way from the beginning, all the way to the end, with the shot through the window, knowing that they were there dead, but they were there dead together. I mean, to me, it was a very rare 10. A long time was a masterpiece in storytelling, and it excited me for the show going forward, because they took that chance of that bottle episode, and it landed perfectly, and it's probably the only place that would have fit in the story, and it makes sense why it was there. So I really, really enjoyed this week's episode. I enjoyed the participation we had from Lynn and the people watching. This is the most amount of people that watched a live episode we've had. So we'll be back next week. This is also going to come out as a podcast later, probably tomorrow or the next day, as long as we have the RSS feed worked out. So if you want to listen back, that would be fantastic. And your support means everything. We come on here and we talk about shows because we love them, and we love to bring our ideas and feelings and hopes to you guys. So thanks a lot for watching. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll be back next week. And IG, until next time.
No more mushrooms on pizza, and don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at cinicradio.com. Available for download on iTunes.